Hello, everyone. My name is Tendayi Achiume, and I'm the United Nations Special Rapporteur on racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. I'm really sad that I'm not able to join you all at the conference and at the training in person, but I'm very excited to see that the World Council of Churches and its partners have put together this training at a time when this work is very urgent. If you look at the amount of resources that states and even international institutions, including the United Nations, have devoted to different causes, I would say that issues of racial equality and racial justice do not receive the level of attention that they require. And so knowing that these kinds of trainings are taking place is very important. I want to just highlight three things that I think are important, or three principles or three approaches that I think are central to doing the work of fighting for racial equality and for pushing back against racial injustice. And I hope that these three ways of approaching the work will be ways of approaching the work that are central to your own discussion there in the work that you're going to be doing. The first, I think, is to highlight that in tackling racism and tackling racial discrimination, all too often there can be a focus only on the most explicit forms of racism, xenophobia, and related intolerance. And unfortunately, we're living in a time when explicit racism, explicit prejudice have all been made more acceptable, including at the global level, at least in the way that political leaders are even willing to speak, the way that the media is willing to document different events. And I would say that even while dealing with these explicit forms of racism and racial injustice, it's very important to remember to focus on structures and institutions and historical legacies that continue to do the work of reinforcing subordination of groups on the basis of their race, of their ethnicity, of their national origin. And so the first thing I would highlight is ensuring that in the fight for racial justice and for racial equality, we pay as much attention to structures as we do to explicit acts of intolerance. The second thing that I would highlight is ensuring that approaches to fighting racial justice and racial discrimination are intersectional in nature. And by this I mean that these approaches should account for the ways that different social categories like gender, sexual orientation, class, national origin can all very fundamentally shape the experience of racial injustice and racial discrimination. And so that fighting against racism means fighting against sexism, fighting against misogyny, fighting against homophobia. These things are very closely intertwined. And then finally, I would say that in my own work, I have been really careful to attempt to prioritize the perspectives and experiences of those who are on the front lines of experiencing racial injustice and racial inequality. And here, I think it's important to think about people who experience racial discrimination as sources of information about what the law, what human rights should mean, what strategies should be adopted to combat discrimination, to combat inequality, rather than just treating these groups as victims without agency and designing solutions that are not ones that resonate with their own lived experiences. And so I would hope that over the course of the conference that your trainings would consider including a serious attention to structures, serious attention to intersectional forms of discrimination, and then also making sure to center the voices and the experiences of those who are most vulnerable to discrimination and intolerance. I thank you very much for the work that you are all doing, and I hope that you will all consider making submissions to my mandate for my thematic reports, and also through the communications procedure that is tied to my mandate, which I know you will be receiving some training on as well. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I cannot be there to join you.